The morning air was cool, carrying that crisp tang of pine and damp soil that all went from the woods behind my house. The sun was just beginning to lift over the tree line, streaking the sky with faint ribbons of gold. I cradled my coffee mug in both hands, letting the steam warm my face as I sat on the porch. From here, I could hear the familiar sound I cherished most. The soft gurgle of the creek. It was only a narrow ribbon of water, weaving its way through mossy stones and roots, but it had a voice. Sometimes it whispered gently, sometimes it sang after a storm, and on days like this, it felt like it was humming a tune just for me. That little creek wasn't much to anyone else, but to me. It was the heart of my property. I'd spent countless evenings sitting by it, watching dragonflies skim the water's surface and deer step carefully to drink. It wasn't just a creek, it was history. My grandfather used to fish for minnows in it as a boy, and my father built a rope swing over the deeper pool back when summers felt endless. It was more than water and rocks. It was a memory that still lived, but peace never lasts long when Karen is involved. I noticed her long before she reached the porch. The sound of her sandals smacking against the gravel driveway was unmistakable. Karen always walked like she was making an announcement. A neon pink vest clung to her like she was on a construction site, and she clutched a clipboard like it was some sacred badge of authority. Her blonde hair was tied back into a bun so tight it looked painful, and her sunglasses, oversized and reflective, made her look like a police officer on a power trip. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just marched straight up my driveway, chin high, eyes locked on me like she'd been rehearsing this confrontation in her head for days. "You know this creek isn't yours, right?" she snapped the moment she was within earshot. Not even of good morning. I lowered my mug and stared at her. "Well, good morning to you too, Karen," tightened to something halfway between a sneer and a smile. "Don't play cute. The HOA has discussed it. That creek is a nuisance. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. It's unsightly, and frankly, it's dangerous. Children could drown in it." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, that water's ankle deep. A toddler couldn't drown in it unless you held them down." Her face twitched, the way it always did when someone challenged her iron rule over the neighborhood. She tapped her clipboard with a pen like it was a gavel. "Doesn't matter. The HOA voted. We're having it filled in with gravel next week. Problem solved. You'll thank us when your yard doesn't look like a swamp." I set my mug on the railing and stood up slowly, letting her know she didn't intimidate me. "Karen, that creek has been here longer than this neighborhood. Longer than this awe. You can't just bury it like trash because it doesn't fit your idea of landscaping." I can," she said with a smirk. "And I will. The majority has spoken. Democracy, you know." She pronounced the word like she'd just invented it. "You mean you bullied everyone into voting your way?" She adjusted her sunglasses. "I persuaded. It's called leadership." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I knew better. Karen thrived on arguments. She twisted every word and used it to fuel her ego. She pushed harder. If you resisted, she doubled down. The only way to win with Karen was not to play her game. Still, the thought of her burying my creek set my jaw tight. "Karen, I seeds into the reservoir. It's not just decorative. It matters." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "Oh, please. It's a ditch with water in it. Nothing more. We're fixing a hazard. End of discussion." She turned on her heel and marched back down their driveway, scribbling something on her clipboard as she went. I knew then there was no stopping her. The following week, the trucks came. I heard them before I saw them. Diesel engines growling, tires crunching over gravel, the hiss of brakes. I stood at the edge of my yard as two men in hard hats unloaded heaps of gray stone from their dump trucks. The creek, my creek, disappeared under a tide of sharp gravel, the sound of rushing water muffled until it went silent altogether. The smell of fresh stone and diesel choked the air. Birds scattered from the trees. The deer didn't come that night. The frogs went quiet. I wanted to scream, to stand in front of the machines, to demand they stop, but just wasn't their fight. This was Karen's crusade, and she watched it all with a self-satisfied smile, arms folded like a general surveying a battlefield. "Looks better already," she said brightly, as if she were redecorating her living room instead of killing a living stream. "Now you won't have to mow around that muddy ditch." I clenched my fists so tightly my nails bit into my palms. "It wasn't a ditch," I muttered, though I doubted she even heard me over the roar of the trucks. To her, the creek was gone. A victory. To me it felt like a funeral. The silence where water once sang was deafening, a hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. I turned away before she could see my face, before she could see just how much it hurt. But one truth settled in my mind as solid as the gravel they dumped. Karen thought she had won, but she didn't understand. Water doesn't vanish because someone covers it. It doesn't disappear because a committee votes it out of existence. Water always finds a way. And when it did, I knew it would carry that every ounce of karma Karen had earned. Would you like me to expand scene 2 in the same style? About 1-0 in words of slow burn build-up HOA chaos and Karen's downfall. It didn't take long for the first cracks to show, literally and figuratively. 2 weeks after the gravel chucks buried my creek, the HOA group chat began to buzz. At first it was a small complaint from Mrs. Dunham, the sweet woman who lived 2 doors down. Does anyone else have low water pressure? My sprinklers barely made it across the lawn this morning. I almost ignored it. Almost. But then, the Johnsons chimed in. Or dishwasher keeps stopping mid-cycle. Water's barely trickling in. By the end of the week, the group was flooded with messages. Showers running cold. Toilet don't flush properly. Grass is turning brown. Even the usually quiet Hendersons, who prided themselves on staying out of HOA drama, posted a photo of their front yard. Once lush, now patchy and dry. I didn't need a plumber to explain what was happening. I knew that creek wasn't just pretty to look at. It was a lifeline, feeding into the underground reservoir system that the entire neighborhood depended on. Block the creek, block the water. Simple as that. I sat on my porch every evening, listening to the silence where the creek used to sing, sipping my coffee like I was front row at a play. And what a show it was. The AOA scrambled. They sent out emails full of empty reassurances. Temporary disruption. Under investigation. Please conserve water until further notice. But no matter how many times they begged for patience, frustration bubbled higher. It wasn't just lawns and dishwashers anymore. Kids couldn't bathe properly. Parents were hauling bottled water from Costco just to cook dinner. The subdivision, so obsessed with its manicured perfection, was starting to look ragged around the edges. And in this neighborhood, ragged was a sin. The breaking point came at the emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't planning on going, but curiosity got the better of me. Besides, I couldn't resist the chance to see Karen squirm. The clubhouse smelled faintly of mildew and cheap coffee. The kind of scent that clung to community centers no matter how often they were cleaned. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, but the people sitting in them weren't neat at all. They were agitated, sweaty, waving their hands and muttering under their breath. The tension in the air was thick, like a summer storm waiting to break. Karen stood at the podium, her neon vest traded for a stiff blazer that was supposed to make her look professional. Her hair was pulled back so tight it practically stretched her face. She clutched her notes with trembling fingers, though she tried to hide it with her usual smile. That brittle, too-white grin that looked more like bared teeth. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice pitched high with forced cheer. I know many of you have been experiencing minor inconveniences with the water supply. I want to assure you the HOA is doing everything in its power to resolve the issues. A man near the back barked. His name was Robert, a heavyset fellow who spent every weekend grooming his lawn like it was a golf course. His voice thundered across the room. My sod is dead. Do you have any idea how much I spring? A ripple of agreement swept through the crowd. Karen raised her hands for calm. Yes, I understand. But, my kids can't shower properly. A woman cut in, her face flushed. Do you know how embarrassing it is to send them to school like that? They smell. Forget the kids. Another voice shouted. If I had to flush my toilet 3 times this morning, and it still didn't clear. Are you going to reimburse me for my water bill? The room erupted into chaos. Everyone was shouting at once. Angry, desperate, their patience worn thin. Karen's voice was drowned out, her attempts to restore order failing miserably. She pounded on the podium with her fist, but only made people shout louder. I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, enjoying every second. I didn't say a word. Not yet. The fury of the crowd was doing my work for me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Karen spotted me. Her eyes narrowed like a hawk locking onto prey. She abandoned the podium and stormed across the room, heels clicking like gunshots against the tile floor. This is your fault, she hissed, jabbing a manicured finger at my chest. You knew this would happen. You let a room quieted just enough for her accusation to carry. All eyes turned toward me. I didn't flinch. I just let a slow, easy smile spread across my face. My fault, I said, keeping my voice calm. Karen, you were the one who ordered the creek filled. I told you it mattered. You called it a ditch. You didn't listen. Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. You could have stopped this. You could have spoken up at the meeting. I tilted my head. I did speak up. You ignored me. Remember, you said it was just a mosquito trap. Looks like it was a little more important than that. Snickers rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, she really screwed us this time. Another voice added, all that money for HOA dues, and we can't even flush our toilets. Karen's face went red, then pale. She looked around the room, desperate for backup, but the people who usually nodded along with her weren't meeting her eyes. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked small. The HOA had no choice. They hired contractors this time to dig out the gravel. It took weeks, cost a fortune, and left the creek looking raw and wounded, but slowly, water began to trickle again. By the time it flowed steady, the neighborhood had suffered months of restrictions. Lawns turned brown, plants withered, people whispered about Karen at every corner, their voices sharp with blame. She tried to hold on to power, but something had shifted. Her aura of control, her smug authority, had cracked. At the next election, she lost her position as president, the clipboard stripped from her hands at last. As for me, I got my creek back. I sat beside it one evening, the air cool and sweet, listening to the water slip over the stones like it had never been buried at all. Dragonflies returned. Frogs creaked in the shallows. The deer came to drink again, their reflections trembling in the ripples. Nature had healed itself, patient and steady. I leaned back on the grass, hands behind my head, and smiled. Karen had tried to bury something alive. She thought she could smother it under stone and authority. But water always finds a way. And in the end, it carried her downfall with it. Would you like me to now write a 4-step prompt sequence for AI art generation, like you asked last time from the Key Moments Rover story, showing the key moments of this creek and karma story?